It's November. And what does that mean? Thanksgiving, turkeys, pilgrims, Scott Pilgrim? I'm a really big Scott Pilgrim fan, and I love that so many of the bands in the comics and the movies take their names from NES games. So for November, I'm going to spend the month doing Scott Pilgrim versus the Backlog and talk about a few of these games. And to kick it off, I want to talk about a game that's as weird and offbeat as the band that took its name, Crashing the Boys for the NES.
Crashing the Boys Street Challenge was developed and published by Technos and released for the NES in late 1992. Known in Japan as Bikuri Neketsu Shin Kirok Harukanaru Kin Medal, or the astonishing new records of Neketsu Distant Gold Medal, the game is part of the Kunio-kun series in Japan, which we got parts of as River City Ransom, Super Dodgeball, Renegade, and Nintendo World Cup. In the Scott Pilgrim comics, Crashing the Boys is a three-piece outfit consisting of guitarist and vocalist Lucas Crash Wilson, bassist Joel McMillan, and drummer Trisha Trasha Ha, and are known for their songs I Am So Sad, I Am So Very Very Sad, We Hate You Please Die, and Last Song Kills Audience. They first appear in Volume 1, but reappear in Volume 3 as the Boys and Crash, citing a hostile takeover by the Boys. They no longer need instruments to create music and help Scott fight Todd Ingram. The story begins with spoiled rich kid Todd Thornley crying over his school's recent loss to rivals Crash Cooney and Southside High at the All-City track meet. In a classic example of fantastic parenting, Todd's father threatens to disown him if he embarrasses the family name by losing to Blue Collar Crash and his friends again. So a no-holds-barred, anything-goes tournament is devised to settle the score once and for all. Crashing the Boys is like many other track and field or Olympics games of the time, consisting of multiple events that have you tapping or mashing buttons a lot. Since this is a street challenge though, the events have a bit of an edge to them. The 400-meter hurdle is kinda like the proper event, but now you can perform hurricane kicks, lay down spike strips, and break down hurdles and throw the pieces at your opponent. Hammer Throw Golf is exactly what it sounds like. It combines the traditional hammer throw with golf, requiring you to get the hammer into the hole in as few throws as possible. The swimming event is actually pretty brutal and has you trying to beat your opponent silly so you can actually drown him. The rooftop event has you jumping between tall buildings using pole vaulting or unicycles to cross tight ropes and gaps. And finally, the fighting scene is just two characters beating the stuffing out of each other, just like in real track and field. The characters are standard for the Kunio-kun series, but in this game they've got rad names like Crash, Cheese, Sprex, Spoon, and Knots. There's several modes, mainly the story mode where you choose one of the 4 participating schools to compete for the title. Before each event there's several stores you can shop at where you can purchase items that boost your stats or will help you in certain events, like a spike strip that appears in your opponent's lane in the 400-meter hurdles to slow them down. It helps give the events a unique flavor and separate them from the more run-of-the-mill games of the genre. The controls vary from event to event, but are exactly what you'd expect. There's lots of button mashing. Whether you're tapping right frantically in order to run, or jamming the button to swing your hammer, you'll definitely be working up a sweat. Now, these events are tough and demand a lot of dexterity, but here's the thing. The computer AI plays at a superhuman level. You are going to get the crap kicked out of you, and there's not much you can do about it. That doesn't mean the game isn't fun, though. Far from it.
The game supports up to 4 players, which makes this the perfect party game. This is old-school multiplayer fun. I mean, this is yelling, shouting, punching each other in the arm, wrestling on the ground fun.
The game is much more fun and manageable when you're not playing against a machine that's simulating button mashing, so grabbing some friends is really the best way to increase your mileage in Crashing the Boys. Even if you're playing alone, though, the game is goofy enough to entertain you. You'll laugh at your horrible failures more often than wanting to strangle yourself with the controller cord, and the events where one person plays at a time are still fun when flying solo. The game doesn't hold your hand, so part of the fun is failing miserably when trying to learn your way around each event. The game's graphics are quite nice, not very surprising when you remember the game was released on the very tail end of the NES's lifespan. They got a lot out of Nintendo's 8-bit darling, with detailed backgrounds that feature a surprising amount of scrolling. Apparently the Famicom version was a standard track and field game, so the backgrounds were all changed during localization to fit the urban setting. The game's music is another high point, full of fun, heavy jams that get your blood pumping and your fingers tapping.
Now, like I said before, the game was released late in the NES's life, so it's not super easy to come by, and the game's gonna run you about $15. But when you consider all the memories of old school multiplayer sessions this is gonna bring back, it's kinda worth it. And hey, if you're a Scott Pilgrim fan, it's a neat collectible.
Crash and the Boys Street Challenge is a flawed but ultimately fun game that you'll get a lot out of. It's definitely not for everyone, but those of you looking for something to rekindle that fiery competitive spirit with your longtime friends, as well as anyone who loves quirky and offbeat NES games, this is definitely worth a look.